So I'm going to talk about React Native for a little bit, and there's actually William who had to drop off because his phone was dying. We were talking in the channel just about cross-platform development with web technologies, so like with JavaScript, and we're talking about like the differences between Electron, if you want to make a desktop application, versus React Native solutions for desktop applications. And someone who's an organization that's been doing a lot for this is Microsoft. So they have React Native Windows, which is now supports targeting every single Windows platform, like including Xbox, HoloLens, I think, Windows, Surface, all that stuff, as well as macOS. So you can build you could target pretty much any desktop with that. There's also solutions for Linux and for other things. But what I wanted to show today is basically traditional React Native would be Android and iOS. There was a time when Apple and Android TV was also part of the core of React Native, but those have been spun out. But if you want to use React Native for those, you can. What I'm going to show off today is React Native Web, which is running here in this Chrome browser, and React Native Mac OS, which since I'm on a Mac, I can build the Mac OS desktop app here and show it off. If I was on Windows, I would do the React Native Windows app. I'm going to show some simple code here. I'm going to try to go really fast through it. And then if you guys have any questions or you're like, what is that? Just feel free to chime in. I probably won't be looking at the text or anything in the chat. So just yell through your microphone. So this is this entire component that's rendering on all four of these screens. So this is an Android emulator. It's a Chrome browser. This is a native desktop application on Mac. And this is a iOS simulator. And it's all just this. So this is a React fragment. This is a safe area view, which is a React component. Like if you are familiar with modern smartphones, smartphone manufacturers want to make it really difficult for developers, so they introduce notches. So this area, you could technically render stuff here or down here where there's no longer a home button. There's this area where you shouldn't do stuff. If you just create a regular application, it's gonna render into those areas. But if you wrap it in a safe area view, it won't. So that's all that is. A view is just like a div. It's just sort of like a view, a container. Text is just text. And I should also clarify, these are all native components. So you write this one way. With React Native components, you can see all these are imported from React Native, and all these are then going to use like the native specific. So this is using a view manager, UI view manager on Mac OS, same on iOS. This is using a div instead of a view, and this is I forgot what the Android one is, but so those are all rendering to native, and that's all this application is. So we've got some style here. Like I was mentioning before when someone was asking what the difference is between React Native and React DOM or like the web. You don't have cascading style sheets. So you need to basically style everything because it's not going to inherit. So you don't want like just the default like text style. You can see it's not very helpful. So, and then one interesting thing, and this is probably the most interesting thing for this talk, is the thing called platform, which we're also importing from React Native. Platform gives you can pull off the OS from it, the operating system. So here, that's how this is getting rendered. So you can see like I'm running on, and then I have a special styling that makes it purple for this text here. Can everyone see this code? Is it too small? It's small. There we go. So this platform here is pulling off off the string for whatever the platform is. It's kind of neat or whatever to see it here, but where it comes in really valuable is if you want to do platform specific code. So if you wanted to do like a conditional statement, like if the platform.os equals iOS, then do this. Since I'm going to go really fast, I was going to try to live code an app, but I'm going to just take the code I already wrote. Let's put that back in there. So yeah, all right. So what I'm building here, what I was going to build live was a rolling prices, closing prices for the last 31 days of Bitcoin in US dollars. I can see Taylor's already shaking his head. So here you can see it's still that same basic file, but we're starting to do some interesting things with it, like pull in live data. So we have this endpoint here. I just found one that didn't require any auth to make it as simple as possible. I don't need that. And what we're doing here is we are using useEffect. We're going to fetch that data. So this fetch right here, this is one thing that's really cool about these cross-platform solutions with React Native. Is so like this fetch is like the web fetch API, but it's a re-implementation specifically for React Native. But all these platforms can just work with it. So they're all going and fetching this data. We got like a pull to refresh. It's not pretty, but it's going and fetching that data. We can see the data here. So I'm logging out that data. So every time it's going and pulling it. Probably not the best practice in how I'm doing it, but so we're basically going and getting this data. The data looks like this. So it's just 31 days Bitcoin price in US dollars. We're then converting it to JSON that React Native can understand and pull in. And we're reversing it because the data is actually coming in earliest date to last date. So we're going to reverse it. Here I'm, instead of taking this object and trying to like iterate through that, I'm just using object entries. So it's creating an array of arrays for each key value pair. And it's reversing it. And then we're just setting that data with useState here, right? And catching an error, and then calling fetch data, and we set loading to false. So we have a loading state. So when that loading state is true, then we go and fetch data. And because this is a use effect, it gets run once on initial render. And then we have a dependency on is loading. So when is loading changes, this use effect hook fires. If we're not loading, we just return a blank screen. That's why it's all janky and turning white, flashing white there for a second. I don't know if you can see it on Zoom. And yeah, then we can do stuff like this. Platform.os equals macOS. So this right here, I don't know if you can see that, says this is just for my Mac friends. It's not rendering on any other device like that. And if you notice too, one thing that's an interesting opinion that other cross-platform frameworks and libraries don't make the same choice on is that you can see this I'm a button on each of them is different. So this I'm a button is following the platform specific standards. So this is like the native button for iOS and Mac, and this for Android, for instance. So this is going to look familiar to an Android user, whereas this is going to look familiar to an iOS user. You don't have to worry about it. If you want to style your own, you can. but React Native does those kinds of things for you, where it respects the platform rather than trying to just override it with one opinion. And so we're rendering all that data here in a flat list. So this is a React Native. I'm pulling it right out of React Native up here. React flat list is it's a kind of virtualized list. It's kind of a sane default for a virtualized list. It's based off of the React Native virtualized list, but if you use the plain virtualized list, there's a lot of boilerplate. So flat list works for 99% of use cases, basically. It's going to take the data, which is the data we set here when we make this this fetch data request. I've got a bunch of lightning here, so maybe my internet's going to go out again. Our render item here. So this is, we're passing it a React component that's going to, basically flatlist is going to iterate over each item in the data array. So if you remember, our data looked like this, and then we converted it to an array of arrays. So basically it's like an array with like 2020-07-11, comma 9278.05 would be the first entry there that we pull off. So that's what it's going to look like, an array of arrays of these. So we're going to map over that and pass each one of those items into this render item function, which is something we created up here. So this is the render item. I'm just going to delete this, which is going to take, we're going to destructure the item off the props here. We could pass props instead of this object destructuring with the item and then destructure it here, but it's easier and prettier like that. Then we have a bunch of styles, and we're basically just creating these rows here. So the only things that are actually coming off of data are the first thing, which is the date, and the second thing, which is the price. And we're doing a 2 fixed, so it's 2 decimal places no matter what. And then we're rendering that on all of these different apps, just like that. It's pretty sweet. The setup for this, so I did this all last night. It's pretty fast. I never actually I've used React Native Web, which is here, but this is using React Native macOS, which is still in beta from Microsoft. But I hadn't run into any like issues, but the only things I really tested were, does the React Native fetch work? Does the flat list work? Do things work as expected? But yeah, I thought if there's no questions about this code, I could walk through like the actual setup for this. Yeah, it's good.
And that sounds good.
So yeah, that's just the data. So this is the React Native docs. They have a section called Out of Tree Platforms. So iOS and Android are the core platforms of React Native. React Native has been going through a process called the Lean Core project, which basically React Native has stripped out a lot of their library and put it into other open source projects. So they took out like the TV platform, for instance. They took out a lot of other things that you don't typically need. So if you need them, you can pull them in from React Native community. But so these out of tree platforms, because React Native, the architecture of it is to target like creating apps, one layer of abstraction that can then target all these different native elements on different platforms. It's a really good candidate for creating a multi-platform library. So you have like React Native Windows, which is what we're actually using here for the macOS thing. It's now all wrapped into the React Native Windows thing. But you've got a few other interesting things. You've got React Native DOM, which is not what I'm using here. I'm using React Native Web. But React Native DOM is another another tool or library to solve the same problem, which is how can you target the web with your React Native code, which is pretty cool. And then you've got like a few other options here. React Native tvOS, this was what used to be inside React Native by default, and then they spun it out to its own library. But so you've got a few of those. Also highly recommend checking out this like platform specific code guide that gives you some tips about how to do platform specific stuff. I'm going to go back before I do the rest of the setup and show this off. So another way to do platform specific code, like let's say you had like one or two things in your component that you wanted like platform specific. Like let's say there's a bug on React Native Web. So you could just have like a one-liner in here that's like, hey, don't do this one thing if you're on the web platform. But if you wanted more customizable things, instead of having like this huge file with like a bunch of conditionals based on the platform, you can also leverage the bundler. And you can, instead of having just a default component, you can have your component dot and then the platform name and then dot. Here I'm using TypeScript, so I've got .tsx, but like .js. So I'm gonna rerun this bundler real quick and show you what happens. So I've introduced now an app.android.tsx and app.macos.tsx. So everything that's doesn't have a specific platform one should just use the default, and everything else should like the macOS one should show macOS, and the so this component is just for Mac. If we refresh here, we still have that same component, and here we're gonna have just for Android. So these are now using like just these basic files here. This is a really good way to structure your code. But I'm gonna go back to the actual setup of all this stuff. So here's the React Native for Windows and Mac OS. The Windows docs have a lot more going on because this project started off as just for Windows platforms. So you can follow along here on how to set it up. All I did, I'll just show you. I'll make this really big. So npx, let's see. React Native init. And then I think I called my thing React Native all the platforms. And so that's all I did. I think actually I did pass a version. So one of the things with the Mac OS React Native was that I ran into a few issues running the latest React Native 0.63. So I ran 0.61.5. So that's all I did to init the application, the project. And then I did like a yarn add React Native Web and React DOM, I think. And that added the React Native Web. And then, as you see here, like we have, besides my cheat folder there, we have like these platform specific folders. And so those are going to have the platform specific code. So you are working with native applications. So there's actually the Android app is all in here, like the specific things that are related to the build, related to the settings. Same with iOS. Like you've got your dependencies and your build targets and your projects. Same for macOS. And then for web, all I did for web for setup is create a very simple like HTML, this is just going to be our, as you see here, like just going to be our entry point for the React app. And you can see here, like in my dependencies. So with just React Native, all you technically need is React and React Native. For React Native Web, you need to have React DOM, which is the same thing you're going to be doing on web, and React Native Web. And then for React Native macOS, you just need that. So I have 5 dependencies, and then a bunch of dev dependencies. Like we have Webpack as bundler. We also have Metro, which is the React Native bundler, or Facebook, I think, also uses Metro for web. And we have some types and stuff. So it's not a ton of stuff here. But you can follow these guides. Excuse me. So you can see, like, they even have a tool, which is what I used for the React Native macOS, which will go in and configure your Metro bundler and set up your macOS build folder. So you just have to run that. So it's literally like a few commands. Like these 3 commands is what you run. And you get a project that is targeting iOS, Android, iPad, Android tablet, web, and native desktop. Yeah, I can share these links as well. Let me see here. I had the React Native Web one somewhere. I don't know where it went. But yeah, it was surprisingly straightforward to set it up, for me at least. Does anybody have any questions or